Thank you, all of you fine Tacomans and Indivisible members, for having me down here tonight to talk. I'm grateful for the opportunity. If it's all right with you, I'd like to sort of lay out an outline of what I want to talk about tonight, sort of what my agenda is, and maybe we can roll from there. So I'd love to tell you a little bit about who I am as a community organizer. I'd love to tell you about my boss, Manka Dhingra, and why I'm working for her and why I think her campaign is so important. And then I'd like to talk a lot about how you all can make a difference and actually help shape the future of our state. Does that sound like a good outline for everybody? Okay, cool. So as I said, my name is Dillon, and a fun fact about me is that I'm actually from here in Tacoma as well. I grew up here. This is my city. So thanks for welcoming me here. I don't need a welcome. I love Tacoma, and any chance I can get to come back here and visit home, and I'll get a chance to go get some real cooked food from my parents after this. It just makes me feel so happy. So thank you. This is a huge opportunity for me, both professionally and personally, just to catch up with folks. I actually went to middle school just down the street from here at Visitation Catholic School with a class of, I think, 18 folks who graduated from that, a little bit smaller than most of the public schools. My parents are both teachers here in Tacoma. My mom teaches Montessori up in the north end at Arcadia. My dad is a public school teacher at Stewart Middle School, which finally got its new building right around the corner from here. And I love this community. I think that what you guys do is really important, but I want to tell you how important it is to somebody who's maybe a little bit younger than most folks in this room, and how much of a difference it made in me growing up and why I do what I do now. I grew up in the Hilltop mostly, but moved to the north end when I was a little bit middle of elementary school, I guess, age. And I did a lot of volunteer work with the parish here in town, St. Leo's Parish, if any of you are familiar. That's where I grew up. I got baptized and confirmed there. That was really like home away from home for me. And I volunteered a lot with their phone bank, and I was a senior high youth group director. And I didn't get into that by accident. I got into that because of people like you in the community doing good work, showing me what it meant to be a person for others. But perhaps nothing was more important to me personally than what my dad did for a living at the time. He wasn't always a teacher. He used to be a reporter for the Tacoma News Tribune, or more importantly, the editor of the political section. If any of you ever read the Nose column, that was him. He started that back in the day. But when I was in middle school, he decided that it would be pretty fun to spend a little bit more time with me and my two younger sisters. And so he decided that being the political editor at the paper just wasn't going to work. I mean, he was there too late. He was reading other people's stuff. If he wanted to help us with our homework or tell me I needed to do more of my homework, he needed a little bit more time to come hang out with us. And so he took one of the only beats that was actually open at the paper as a reporter to make sure that sort of deadline window was different for him. And at the time, it seemed like a pretty great beat. It was the military beat. We have Joint Base Lewis McChord. If you want to go out to the peninsula, I mean, we have a lot of folks involved in the services in our area. And that's something I think as a community we're proud of. And it has inspired me to do more, to want to work with veterans and take care of folks. But, back in 2000, we had an election. I was a little younger. You all probably remember this a little bit better than me. But we had a vote. The Supreme Court ended up deciding it, giving us President Bush. Things happened. We made bad decisions as a country. And eventually he ended up sending a lot of people off to Iraq for war. And my dad had been covering the Stryker unit, if any of you are familiar with that, sort of paying attention to their training and the development of the vehicle itself. And all along, as he had been researching that, he had sort of known that whenever they were first deployed, hopefully on like a training mission or some sort of peacekeeping mission, he would be going with them to cover their deployment for a while and be able to report on what folks stationed here in Pierce County and the Tacoma area were doing when they were overseas. Now, I didn't grow up in a military community personally, though I know a lot more about that world now. My mom was a total pacifist and hippie, and I used to wear tie-dye shirts that she made for me, right? It was a total culture shock for our family. But he ended up spending about a year in Iraq as an embedded reporter, jumping out of the back of Strykers with just a pad and a pen. And that did a lot to our family. I mean, it was hard as a 15-year-old to be the only male figure around in my household. And there are things I remember from that time that are just like, really, really intense memories for me about what it means when we make decisions with our government and our elected officials and what kind of consequences they have. I remember my mom wanted to get a new roof on her house, and hearing from the roofing company that she had called that they really needed to talk to her husband. And her response was, well, that's great. If you can figure out how to call Iraq, then by all means, talk to him. But right now, it's a little tough. And I still remember a time, one of the things that we did a lot as a family to sort of cope with that whole experience was volunteer on base to hang out with kids whose parents and loved ones were overseas. And I was a punk rock youth. I used to play shows just up the street at Asbury Methodist Church with my friends. I had dyed pink hair and didn't look like the average 15-year-old going on base. But I still remember going up to the house of the family we were going to go hang out with and have snacks. And as soon as we opened the door, their young 6-year-old boy just ran up to me and hugged me. I'll never forget that. So as I went through high school and went on to Seattle University and started studying political science, I knew that I wanted to do something about this. I didn't want to ever let our world get to a place where we made decisions like that again. And I wanted to be the kind of person that could at least tell all my friends and family, hey, I'm doing something about it. And I'm out there making steps that matter. So when I graduated, I actually ended up getting a job here in Tacoma as an organizer for Senator Patty Murray in her re-election campaign. It was the year that the Cook brothers ended up spending like $6 million on Dina Rossi's behalf. I'll come back to Dina Rossi in a second. And we were fortunate enough to beat him through a lot of hard work and community organizing. I used to knock doors every day all throughout Pierce County, talking to voters about why it's important, right? And since then, I've been fortunate enough to go on. I talked to Jason for a little bit in the back. I've worked in politics and campaigns for about the last 8 years now. I ended up working for Senator Murray a little bit in her official staff. I worked on the Obama campaign in 2012 as a regional director. Again, here in Pierce County, sort of managing the teams for Congressman Kilmer and Congressman Heck's staff, as well as all the way down to the border with Oregon. And after that, I rode the bus a little bit. I packed up my car and went to Michigan to go try and help flip a seat and turn a red congressional district blue. I found out that's a lot harder than it seems. We didn't succeed. But then I spent some time in the Midwest and Iowa helping build environmental movements ahead of the presidential caucuses. And I ended up coming back to Washington in 2015 to work on the statewide endangered animals ban. If any of you remember that, we were fortunate enough to win every single county in the state, take 70% of the vote. I'm under no illusions that I'll never do that again in my life, but it was a lot of fun. And since, last year I worked as the state director for the Washington State Democrats coordinated campaign, managing all of our organizers around Washington State, training them, and trying to make sure that we put together programs that would help elect more Democrats down ballot. Now, that's all important because I was convinced after all that work and after all that time and just too many hours on campaigns that I probably would never do this again. And then we lost in 2016. And I'm guessing the reason you're all here is probably the same reason I'm doing this, which is I saw the results and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't fathom how we got to this place as a country where somebody's so unqualified, somebody's so hateful. I mean, in every capacity we could sit here and describe it. I could spend all night talking about the ways our president isn't fit to lead us. But I felt this like burning, and it took me months. I went on a road trip with my girlfriend. I traveled the country a little bit and said, I can't quit. This isn't the time. Like, we have to keep doing this work. I'm guessing that's why you are all here still, right? And so I heard about a special election that was going to be coming up in our state. And I started to look into it more, and I realized in 2017, usually the national focus is all on two governor's races. If anybody's familiar, it's Virginia and New Jersey. And that's because they hold off-year gubernatorial elections, and they often become like a laboratory for political campaigns around the country to sort of explore ways to take tools that might have been built in the presidential level and run really high-level campaigns. Now, both of those elections look like they're sort of marching towards being done. The Virginia primary was just last night. New Jersey looks similarly finished. And it leaves us with really one race around the country that everybody's paying attention to. And that might seem unbelievable to us as Washingtonians, where we're used to being labeled as a blue state, but it's here in our backyard. It's in the 45th Legislative District, which for those of you who don't know, is in East King County. It comprises parts of Redmond, but not all of Redmond. It comprises parts of Kirkland, but not all of Kirkland. Woodinville almost entirely. We get Duval, and then we get parts of Sammamish, but not all of Sammamish. So it's kind of your stereotypical legislative district drawn into sort of weird shapes to fit an area in East King County. And it's going to be the most important race that happens across our country this year, period. I don't think we've ever had that in Washington. That's a new thing for us. And I would just like to take a second to let that sit in. The most important race of 2017 in our entire country is a legislative race in Washington State. I'm willing to bet if you went on like the John Oliver show or the Daily Show or whatever else and started doing a street quiz for people like, hey, where do you think the most important election is going to be in 2017? They would probably come up with a whole host of places that aren't Washington. And when we told them, like, Redmond, you mean where Microsoft is? They'd look at you again and think, wow, that's really kind of crazy. I wouldn't have guessed that. It doesn't seem like the place that would be the battleground for our whole country. But it is, and there's a few reasons why. Currently, we have a split state senate. Are you all kind of familiar with how we got to this place, right? A few years ago, there were a few Democrats that decided they'd rather caucus with Republicans in our state senate. They formed the majority coalition caucus, and they ended up taking control of that branch of our government. And so now we have, Democratic Governor Jay Inslee, Democratic State House, and a split state senate. And it's kind of ironic because it makes our state government look a lot like what happens in DC, right? Where we can't get things through because we have an intransigent branch of our government. And so we have a state senate that won't cut deals. We're now going towards what looks like another special session and maybe a shutdown on June 30th, we'll see. And, we have this sort of like hung, legislature. And this race is actually going to determine which party has control of the state senate and therefore potentially control of Washington's entire government. Now, in a normal year, that would be just average Washington politics, right? Big races happen all the time. We could have important ones to our state, but it actually takes on a lot more significance this year because of the consequences nationally, right? We have a chance to become an entire wall on the west coast of blue states. They're standing up for things that we all believe in, right? And that stands as a stark sort of contrast to President Trump's agenda, right? If we could get Washington to continue to lead on climate issues and actually pass things through our legislature, we can send a message to those folks in DC, hey, you might want to pull out of the Paris Accord. That's fine. Go ahead. You're going to do your thing, President Trump. There's clearly not much that we can say to you about that. But here in Washington, we're actually going to take care of that, and we're going to think about future generations, and we're going to make sure that our kids aren't breathing toxic air that's going to give them diseases when they're older. We're going to actually work on that, and we're going to make sure that we build an economy that's environmentally sustainable, that puts more people into good jobs that are creating clean energy jobs, and actually take things forward and build a progressive vision for what our country could be, right? And that's the chance that we have this year. We rarely get that chance. I would challenge any of you in the room who all probably have more political experience than me to tell me of a time when an election in Washington had such profound impact on what's going to happen in our country. I don't think it's ever happened. And that's one of the reasons it's so important. And so I found myself in a place where even after a long time of doing this work, I wanted to come back and do more of it. And I really wanted to get involved. And so I started reaching out to some friends and figuring out who our candidate was going to be when I got to meet my now boss, Manka Dhingra. Manka, first and foremost, is one of the most incredible candidates I've ever worked with for any office, but especially this one. Manka actually immigrated to the United States when she was 14. Her father had passed away, and she ended up moving to Southern California to go to high school and start a life here in the States. She loved it, ended up going to Cal Berkeley, where she did some work with folks starting what were some of the first domestic violence prevention organizations on the West Coast geared towards the Southeast Asian community. In fact, they founded a lot of what she brought up here to Washington when she came to UW for law school. She had met her husband now, Harjeet Singh, down there in the Bay Area, and they moved up to Washington together, ended up settling in Redmond, where he had a tech job and she went to law school. And she started and founded the first Southeast Asian domestic violence prevention organization in Washington, and certainly in the Northwest, API China, if any of you are familiar with it. They do advocacy and programming on behalf of both victims and organizations and workplaces to try to make sure that they're doing more to bring those issues into the forefront and really take care of them in a community that sometimes pays too little attention to them. On top of that, she also was the first clerk for Justice Barbara Madsen. Up until that point, she'd never actually had a clerk before, but she met Manka through her domestic violence work and decided it was time to change that. And Manka ended up going on to an internship in the Attorney General's office, and upon graduating, started working in the prosecutor's office for King County, where she, up until I guess a week ago now, was serving as the senior deputy prosecutor for King County. And in that role, she gets to do something really unique that I think a lot of us would probably find compelling. She actually chairs and runs the second and one of only 2 nationwide alternative therapeutics units. In other words, she chairs the mental health and veterans courts for King County. And in that work, does more to try and save taxpayer dollars and work to think about holistically what our criminal justice system is doing to try and rebuild lives of folks that really might need treatment and preventative services rather than jail time. And I personally am compelled to that. I think that's incredible. And in a time where we're putting too many people in jail, having somebody who has experience in the ground level, the nitty-gritty of trying to find alternative programming for folks, that's exactly the kind of progressive vision that I want to work for and be a part of in our state. Beyond that, Manka is also somebody who steps up in times of need, right? After 9/11 and we started seeing a rise in hate crimes around the country, in fact in Seattle there was a Sikh cab driver who was assaulted. Manka stepped up and said, how can I get involved and do work to help change this? And one of the first things she did is actually trying to lead de-escalation techniques for the Seattle police force, so that in situations that are kind of like crises, she was training police officers how to take a step back. How can we take the temperature down a little bit and help solve problems instead of creating more, right? Beyond that, she's kind of gotten involved in her personal life as well. She's on the board of NAMI Eastside, which if any of you are familiar is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Yeah. She's been working hard to really bring that organization more towards an advocacy and programming role, where they're providing more services both for people suffering from mental disabilities or loved ones of those suffering, and trying to really create holistic programs for them that get them to a place where they're rebuilding their lives and finding sound footing to go forward from. The last thing that's really impressive to me, and I know this from my life here in Tacoma, growing up going to Downing Elementary, is that Manka is a PTA mom, right? And my mom was too. I still remember walking to school every day with her and having her make us staff the carnivals at school and being involved in every extracurricular program we could. Manka is that mom. It reminds me of my own mom, and I love it. It's, I always sort of joke about this. Manka's the second coolest mom that I know, obviously to my own. Manka is an award-winning PTSA mom, though. She not only helped start in Redmond, but continued to coach the math, chess, and destination imagination programs in their school. In fact, a couple weeks ago, she actually left us for a little bit to be there as a chaperone for her daughter's destination imagination team as they competed in globals, which, sad for all of them, their global competition was in Tennessee. But hey, she wanted to go do that, and I think it's something that really speaks to the kind of person she is. She's tremendously accomplished on her professional career, and yet she still finds the time to volunteer and do more with her free time that she does have, trying to make the lives for those around us a little bit better through her work on domestic violence, her work in the schools, and her work helping folks with mental disabilities. And so to me, as somebody who looks for candidates to go work for and ends up on political campaigns, I said, wow, I think I got another one in me. I think I could do this for probably another year, even as crazy as that sounds. And I got, so sucked into it that I was like, I gotta do this, And I met with Manka several times, and here I am now as their outreach director. So that's the candidate we have. Told you a little bit why it's important, and I've also told you a little bit about who I am, how am I here, why does this even matter, why is my message valid, right? So now I want to talk a little bit about our campaign, and in the context of that, how you all can help make a difference. Even though you might live down here and not be able to vote in the 45th, there are things that you can do to help us. So anytime we get a campaign of this stature, right, we're not used to this in Washington, we were used to big spending campaigns, it was wild. But I just want to talk about the numbers here for a second, right? Our Republican opponents are probably going to spend like $5 million against us. I've never seen $5 million. I've never even been close to it. I don't know what it smells like, but they do, and they have it, and they're going to spend it against us, right? We're hoping to raise a budget of $1.2 million to be able to spend back against them. And even that is crazy. When you think about the fact that the average state legislative race probably costs like $200,000 to $300,000, that ought to be a sign to you how big of a deal this is. That's the kind of message we're looking to send across the country. That's the kind of money it's going to take to even be able to run a competitive campaign against what they have against us, right? And even then, acknowledging that as our goal for a budget still shows you that there's a $3.8 million gap between those two things, right? Which means that we have to get smarter. And I think we all learned that last year. We have to come up with a program that's going to be a little bit better than just expecting people out of obligation to come support us. I don't think any of you in this room feel obligated to just come help us. I want to tell you why you should. I want to tell you about Manka. I want to tell you about what we're doing and why it's innovative and why you can come help be a part of it, right? So with that budget, and Manka's already raised over $400,000 right now. We actually are in the lead on fundraising, at least on the candidate side. as crazy as that is. We haven't taken any money from the party yet or anybody else, and we're still ahead by like $100,000. And it's because of people like you. We're not just getting these huge checks from wealthy donors. No, we have more small dollar donations than Jin Young by substantial margins. In fact, Manka is already over 4,000 individual contributors, which is pretty incredible. And we've got donations from 34 different states in the country right now. Awesome. I can't even guess when the last time a race in Washington State took contributions from 34 different states for a legislative race. I'd be surprised if people even knew we had a legislature. But, that's an incredible thing. And you bet we're going for all 50. We've got our interns plotting out which states we haven't received donations from. We're going to start calling them. But, with that money, we want to try and run a campaign that makes sense and takes into account some of the things that we learned from last year. And that's why I jumped in. I want to make sure that outreach makes sense. So we're doing a few different things that I think are going to be really helpful. The first is we are working with young people to teach them how to campaign and get involved in civics in a much more robust way than any campaign I've ever worked for. We have a teen campaign committee right now of over 30 strong, and they're all coming into the office every day to do anything they can to help. In fact, they just decorated an entire wall of our campaign office with bios about all of them so that everybody can learn how cool our teenagers are that are helping out. And they're not just doing things like decorating our office. They're helping us make calls to voters. They're writing plans. They're doing research on potential meetings we should take. I mean, they're getting involved. At our campaign launch, our teen campaign committee staffed the entire event. And thanks to their work staffing our table with like shirts and stuff to give out, they raised over $10,000 for the campaign. Now, I haven't worked on any campaigns that have trusted teenagers that much, but I sure wish I hadn't. Because when I was a teenager, I was suffering from this stuff just like everybody else. I already told you that, right? So we're giving them a chance. That's one of the first things. Is we want to make sure that everybody who really has a lot at stake in this election gets to be a part of it. And those kids who are going through our schools right now that want to see them get fully funded, they're the first people that should be helping out with our campaign. So the second thing we're doing is we're trying to get smarter about how we do our voter contact and we talk to people about our campaign in the district. Now, this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but bear with me. In most campaigns around Washington State, in fact, there's a perpetual battleground district not too far away from here, the 28th LD. Are any of you familiar with that over in Lakewood, University Place? Okay. Every 2 years, it's one of the most expensive places to run for office in Washington, and we keep doing the same thing. One of the things I told Manka is we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to just think about things in strict party labels and just go after like strong Democrats and lean Democrats. We're going to try and talk to everybody we can and figure out where they stand, and then we'll decide what to do with them. But why should we write these people off before we even talk to them? Shouldn't we figure out who they are first and listen to what they have to say? And so that's how we're breaking it down. We're thinking of people in different types of chunks, right? We are working on voters of many different sort of backgrounds and performance levels, but we're talking to people about things that really matter to them. Every conversation that we have, we're asking them about which issues they care about, and we're recording that in a way that most campaigns don't, because we want to know, we want to follow up with folks, because we have a lot of wonderful, indivisible folks like you. We've also got rooms full of teachers that want to help, that know how important this is. Environmentalists working with Washington conservation voters that want to go out there and tell people how important it is to elect an environmental champion like Manka. So with all of that information that we get from the work that we're doing, we're trying to make sure that the right people can talk to the right folks with the right message. Because we don't think there is a right message, we don't think there are the right people. It's a little bit of both, right? We need to make sure that we're thinking about how to connect those dots. So when it comes time in July, and we're getting out the vote for Manka, and we know there's, say, a couple thousand people who really care about education right now, we're going to make sure that it's our teachers that are going out there and talking to them. Because why shouldn't it be? They're the ones in schools right now. They're the ones struggling. They're the ones getting labeled as, getting all their summers off, and we all know that's not true. There are conferences that are planning out lessons for the next year ahead. We're going to help go tell people that so they understand a little bit more about our community, right? And that's kind of the theme of our campaign. We're trying to strengthen communities. In fact, if you see one of Manka's yard signs, you'll see that phrase. And it's not just an accidental thing. It's not like poll-tested language that we ran somewhere or something a consultant came up with. It's legitimately what Manka wants to do and what she's done her whole life. And so that's what we're going to be bringing to people. Now, beyond just thinking more scientifically maybe about who we're talking to and the kinds of voter contact that we want to do or what we want to learn from people, we're also trying to take advantage of the tools that we have in front of us. How many of you talk about Facebook with your friends, or talk about politics on Facebook with your friends? Anybody? Yeah, I figured. Safe bet. I mean, I know I get messages from like my grandparents these days about it, so everybody's doing it. But we're trying to take that into account. We want to build a social media campaign that shows off cool pictures of what we're up to, right? And so we do that. If you go to Manka's page, in fact, if there's one thing you all can do today, following this meeting, it's a quick action, low barrier, go find Manka Dhingra's page online on Facebook and follow us. Because you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see the pictures of our young folks getting out there and doing this work. You'll see Manka at community meetings, at mosques, in neighborhoods with folks, talking to voters. You'll see what I'm talking about. So go, please follow it. And if you have a phone, I don't mind if you do it right now. I'm not going to take it away. But we're trying to make sure that we use technology more in a sophisticated manner. So beyond sort of like the campaigning on social media platforms, we're also trying to think through how to reach people on those tools, right? And we're making sure that when we are doing ads, we're not just focusing on television ads that may or may not get watched anymore. I mean, most of us are probably moving off TV as much as we can anyways, and thank God. But we want to make sure that we get people like digital ads, so that when they're going to certain types of websites, they're going to hear about us and make sure that those folks really get a chance to hear about our campaign. We're also going to be doing something cool that I worked on last year. We're going to be carrying forward to this. Have any of you ever gotten a random text message about politics? And maybe it came from like somebody, cool, purporting to be like an environmentalist saying like, vote against Donald Trump, he's going to destroy the earth. And back then we thought it was a joke, now we know it's true. We're going to be doing the same kinds of things, except what we found, actually one of the most effective ways to do that kind of work is when we send text messages to voters around an election window, we can actually create a conversation with them that's similar to, like, say, how we would phone bank. Now, quick show of hands, how many of you ever volunteered on a campaign before? It's like half the room, okay. Pat on the back for all you guys, thank you for your help. How many of you phone banked on the campaign? All right, and how many of you felt like after that experience you didn't talk to as many people as you were hoping to beforehand? Yeah, I figured it would be about 100%. See, now here's the beauty of a text message campaign, right?
Yep.
How many of you get a text message and don't even look at it? I mean, I get a lot working for Manka's campaign right now, and I still look at all of them. So if you did raise your hand, no excuses. But as soon as you get that, you see it, right? And that's the value of campaign materials, right? If we mail somebody, we know they're going to check their mail, or hope they do. If we put on a TV ad, we have no idea whether or not they're going to tune into the channels they want. If we put ads up online, we're kind of hoping that they go to the websites that we want, or that we targeted their IP address the right way. All these techniques that are out there, right? But with a text message, we know for sure somebody's going to look at that because that's what we all do, right? And what I found last year doing this work on behalf of the Democrats is that people actually have a lot of questions. I don't think it's surprising to any of us as relatively woke individuals showing up to meetings like this that there are people out there that don't pay enough attention to politics. But you definitely find that out when you come help out and you start texting voters and trying to talk to them. Many of them don't even know where their closest drop box is, or what color ink they need to use when filling out their ballot, or what happens if they didn't get a ballot in the first place, right? And if we build forms of communication with people like that, we can make sure that what happened in 2016 doesn't ever happen again. That people who really make up the working class and the marginalized communities we were talking about earlier, and the folks all across our state that need more representation, the solution is we need to make them vote and make sure that they participate. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to do it in a smarter way than just expecting people to come help our campaign without any real strategy or plan in place, right? And that's kind of what gets me here tonight. This is a long way away from Redmond, and the traffic reminded me of that. But I think that you guys can actually do some things to help with our campaign. And I'm willing to promise you that we'll make sure we show you what that return on investment is going to be. Because if I came here hat in hand and said that I have a cool new political action committee that Indivisible should support, and all I need is about $20,000 from you guys, I'm going to make it happen, y'all would ask me for some details. I would hope you would want to know what I'm asking for that for, right? And you would want to know, like, okay, Dillon, let's talk, but let's see the details, dude. We're going to do the same thing for you as volunteers. We respect the fact, your time is not, infinite. I wish it was, because we would ask you for a whole heck of a lot more help, but it's not infinite. It's finite. You have lives that happen outside of these meetings, and you probably have kids to take care of, grandkids to take care of, a job to go to, groceries to pick up. I mean, we all live busy lives, right? And I'm asking you for some of your help. I'm telling you, we're going to show you why it matters. We're doing that in a couple different ways. One, if you come into our office, you'll see, and I expect to see all of you up there. If you come into our office, you'll be able to see we have all sorts of art across the walls that show everybody who's participating our accomplishments, because we've laid out our goals publicly for folks. We'll tell you straight up how many doors we're trying to knock in the primary election and how many doors we want to knock for the general. And every time you come help out, we'll help fill that in and show you how much of it you've actually accomplished together with us. And the same thing is true with our phone calls. More importantly, we have software where we can show you maps of how far we're making it through the various precincts in the district. And that's something I send around to a lot of our allies every week to show them, hey, like, we're not just talking about knocking doors. Here's a heat map of our entire legislative district that shows you where we've been to and where we haven't. And if you can come help out with us, we can show you the same thing so that you can understand those tools exist. And next time you're helping out and say like the 25th or the 28th legislative districts down here in Pierce County, you can say, hey, I met this guy named Dillon up in Redmond, it was kind of weird, but he told me about this mapping software, they showed it, it seemed really helpful, maybe we could bring that out down here, right? And that seems important to me. Or maybe it's a Tacoma mayoral race that you care particularly about. Or maybe even a Tacoma City Council race. Or maybe you just really want to make a difference in the school board. That's the kind of campaign we're running. It's not just a chance to take back our legislature and make this huge middle finger to President Trump. It's more importantly, a chance to show a lot of people how, with such an important race, we can share the techniques of campaigning more efficiently and make sure that on any race you care about, those democratic tools are available and present for you, and we can keep organizing our community in a more sustainable way that's going to allow us to not be faced with these massively expensive and single one-off elections that determine the fate of our state senate. We wouldn't be in this place if we elected more progressives and Democrats across the state. We wouldn't. But it's going to take a lot of hard work to change that. And so that's kind of the last thing I wanted to be able to say before like taking some questions and hopefully answering anything that you guys have, is that this is not easy work. I mean, you all have been doing it for at least as long as I have, but I just want to tell you that as a staffer on campaigns, this is now my 8th year, and none of it has come easy. There's not a single one that we've won that happened because we all like said, Obama's gonna get it, it'll be fine. He'll just cruise over Mitt Romney, everything will be perfect. Or Washington's a blue state, why do I have to help out? Well, let's talk a little bit about recent elections in Washington. Let's do it. Because Patty Murray won by 3 points in 2010, and that was the difference between barely holding on to a Democratic Senate nationally and not. And in 2012, our Governor Jay Inslee has been one of the biggest champions for fighting climate change in our state in a whole heck of a long time. He actually only won by a little over 1%. And what makes the difference in races like that is not like TV ads. It's not how much money you have. It doesn't really matter how many mail pieces you send. It's people like us knocking on doors and talking to our neighbors and reminding them that they need to vote because it makes a difference. That's what wins races like that. And when we take that for granted and miss that, and we aren't willing to do that hard work, we suffer hard consequences. I think that's evident right now. So my ask to all of you tonight is, I know that Redmond is far, and I know it's not easy to get up there, but I also know that we all have weekends, or hopefully have weekends. And I don't think it's too much to say that on a given weekend, we could get a good group of people from here in Tacoma to come up to Redmond to talk to some of our progressive and democratic friends, to say, hey, I actually live 60, 70 miles away. And let me tell you, that might seem weird that I'm here talking to you today, but this is really important. What you guys do is going to determine whether or not my kid goes to school in a portable or a building, right? What we vote on up here is actually going to determine whether or not I can breathe clean air in our state. And what you guys do up here is actually going to make a difference in whether or not we can fully fund like mental health programming at hospitals, say like Western State. It's going to make a huge difference, and we all have to be a part of it. Now, I've been to a lot of these meetings and talked to a lot of folks that say, yeah, but I'm not very comfortable knocking on doors. I just feel really nervous about getting out there and talking to people. I've heard that, and I understand that, because that used to be me. But I want to end with one of my favorite stories about doing this work, and then take questions. When I first started in 2010 as an organizer, I was out on one of my first days going canvassing, actually, just south of here in Spanaway, with a coworker that I hadn't met yet. And we were driving out there getting to know each other. He was like, dude, yeah, we were talking, we used to play high school basketball. I was like, cool, I'm a basketball fan, we can get along, like, let's talk, dude. And we ended up having this great conversation all the way out there, We get to this mobile home sort of park where we were gonna go do our canvassing for the day and try to convinced some folks that Patty Murray was the best senator for our state. And we get out there and we've knocked most of our packets. It's a hot day, so in Washington it's like 75 degrees. And I'm like, hey Jimmy, is there any chance you could toss me the keys to the car? I'd love to turn the air conditioning on and just get it ready for us. He had a couple more doors to knock. And after all this talk about basketball, he said, yeah man, no problem, I'd be happy to. And we're probably here from me to Robert. And he ends up tossing me keys to his car, except he throws them underhand in a very weird way that ends up there, on the roof of a mobile home nearby. And I immediately panicked because I was new to this job, and the last thing I wanted to do is get fired because I got lost, on the job with my coworker. Of course our boss would believe that we threw the keys on the roof of a mobile home. That would totally sit in, right? And we ended up canvassing that whole neighborhood that we were originally sort of like awkward and nervous about just talking about politics, looking for a ladder to try and go get our keys. And what we found was a lot of people who were far more helpful than you would imagine. They're like, no way, that's crazy, let us help you. And so we eventually found a ladder, and Jimmy's afraid of heights, so he made me climb up it. I tried to reach and get these keys, and there's just like the perfect amount that's far away from being able to grab, like right at the apex of the roof, right? Somehow it landed on there, or staying there. I'm like finding rakes and stuff. I'm a scrappy neighborhood guy from Tacoma. I'm like, I can figure this out. And I couldn't. And so, after like climbing on this like corrugated tin roof, and I was impaling myself on like my 4th day of work, I decided, you know what, like, we're just gonna have to take the bus back. We're gonna have to tell our boss, like, it was a rough day. Hopefully she'll respect us for being honest, right? And we get back down to the car, and Jimmy turns around to me and is like, fine, man, I guess. And he pulls out a spare key from underneath his bumper. And we ended up driving out and leaving. Now, canvassing might not be that terrifying, but it is fun, and you will create memories, and you're gonna have a good time. So my big ask to all of you tonight is please sign up. We'll put together a day specific for Indivisible Tacoma. In fact, if you all want to join, we have an Indivisible Day already on the books with many chapters around the Puget Sound where they're going to come out and knock doors. You might even find that you can meet some Indivisible folks from another area and get to know a little bit about what their meetings are like and what kind of programming they're doing. But we need you because we're getting help from people in Oregon and California and Alabama and New York. It doesn't matter. We're getting help from 34 different states. But what none of them can do is spend a weekend day and drive up and come help us talk to voters. They have to make phone calls. They have to write postcards. They can't. It's not reasonable for us to say, come fly out to Washington and knock doors. But you all can. And it's not that far. And it's also worth it for all the reasons that I just talked about. So I'm happy to answer questions if that makes sense. Jason, anybody else? I would love to get you all signed up to come canvass with us. I promise it's fun. Anything else I can do to sort of help explain the importance of this race, but I am very grateful for all of your time. I don't want to take up the entire meeting, so. Sure.
I don't know anything specifically about her, except what she presented tonight. And so is there a way to learn more if we were going to canvas?
Definitely.
Training, so we
Yeah.
inculcated with your message?
Yes, we can do that. So some of you around the room might have seen myself and a couple of our field organizers actually recorded a video that walks through Manka's message, really similar to what I talked about earlier, but it's a good start. Turns out it's really hard to record a video. I didn't think it would be that hard, but it took us like 4 hours to do it without messing it up. We don't have the best software either, we're just kind of doing it scrappy. But we do have that video. Yeah, it's a 3-minute video too. Detail doesn't make it sound so good. We do. So we have a website. It's www.electmanka.com, and Manka is M-A-N-K-A. And if I'm happy to send a link with the video to the folks who contacted me tonight, and make sure that makes its way around so that you can have a look at it. If you have more questions beyond that and specifics, I'm definitely the person to talk to, and I'm more than happy to help walk you through sort of where Manka's at on.
Say the website again.
Yeah, so it's www.electmanka.com.
What are some potential dates that you would want folks to come up and help?
Yeah, so the first one that we're really looking at, I want to say, the question was, what are some potential dates that we would be looking at for help? So there's a couple that are already on the books. I believe, and let me follow up with an email to everybody about that so I can give you the specifics. There's actually a Facebook event for it. It's called like Door Knocking for Manka. If any of you know Margaret Carey, she's part of the Seattle Indivisible group, but I can get you in touch. She's actually helping put this together for us. So the first one is in this month. It's in June. I want to say it's the 25th. But perhaps more importantly, I'm sure you all are familiar with how we vote here in Washington, but we get 18 days to chase down folks and make sure that they vote because we do all mail-in voting. So within that window is what we call Get Out the Vote, or GOTV. It's the period where we can actually make sure that people do vote and help make them vote. And so that window, picking a date within that time is the most valuable to us.
Mhm.
And that starts July 14th and goes all the way through August 1st, election day in the primary. Yeah.
So, for people that haven't done that before, could you I think it might be helpful if you just say, okay, we're gonna usually start at this time, we finish at this time. This is how we're gonna educate you, so you know how to answer the questions, that type of thing. Kind of
Yeah.
put people at ease, maybe.
Definitely. So the first thing I'll say about that is, when people come out to help us, it's just gonna have to work. When people come out to help us, we're not actually sending you out there to have difficult conversations and argue with people about whether or not they should or should not support Manka. When we get the help of volunteers like you, we're sending you out there to do turnout work and really talk to people that should be supporting us, right? And figure out and make sure they are, but then mostly talk about remembering to vote, making sure that we know what issues they care about. So the first thing I'll say is it's really harmless. These conversations are almost all fun. I've done some looking at our work thus far. I think we've successfully completed 1,800 surveys out of 7,000 or 8,000 door attempts, and very, very few, lower than 8%, have turned out to be people that didn't support us. So it's predominantly helping out with just making sure people remember to vote, right? 2017 is not a normal election year, so we need to make sure that people are used to voting and are ready to. And I like to say that voting is kind of like a muscle. The more you flex it, the stronger it gets, right? We got to really help make sure that we're helping people flex their voting muscles. So the way it works, we run shifts every weekend, and they start at 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And so they last for about 3 hours, then maybe a little bit longer if people are coming back. And we always start with a training. We don't send anybody out without giving them a chance to learn what it is we're doing. And so that starts with literally understanding either the mobile app that we use or our walk packets that people can get printed out, and we'll have a clipboard with them. We walk people through what the questions we are doing. We do some role play so that you and a friend can get a chance to practice the script against each other. And then for folks that don't want to go out by themselves, we're more than happy to send them out in pairs so you can go out with a friend and make sure that it's a fun sort of, friend date day. So we do all of that in-house and on the spot. And we have 3 field organizers. Most state senate races in Washington don't ever even hire one. They usually have a campaign manager, maybe one other person. We've hired 3 and me because this is what we care the most about. So we're putting our money where our mouth is. Yeah.
I live in the fabled 28th legislative district. Seen a lot of unpleasant things happen there. Got a mailing not too long ago from the incumbent senator that had a link to a survey which was very biased, very slanted. That's a small example of what happens when there's already somebody there. I would expect to see some really dirty tricks
Oh yeah.
in the election in the 45th district. Is there any way to anticipate what those tricks might be and prepare for them so that we can combat them?
Yeah. So there's a number of those. I was literally on the phone about that on the way down here. Just the other day we got a call from a volunteer that all of our campaign's yard signs in the whole neighborhood have been smashed down and replaced with our opponents. I'm a firm believer that yard signs don't vote, and their overall impact on our campaign is relatively limited. But that's pretty annoying. They cost money. That's pretty dirty. I don't know why you do that, and especially because I don't think they make that many people vote. Why go break all of ours? That seems like a lot of work for something that doesn't make that big of a difference. But there are other ways that people are up to the same tricks. Look, I think in this race, there will be a lot of independent expenditures that spend money on behalf of candidates, and we can't coordinate with any that would support us. They technically can't coordinate with any that would support their candidate. They have to be sort of firewall off from each other, right? But all of the work that we're doing is through our campaign right now. That's how we're talking to all the voters, and I don't think they've done any of that through their campaign. It's all been through these independent groups that are harder to track their contributions, harder to have accountability around. And I don't know if that's a dirty trick. That's kind of the way that the politics works right now. But I find it concerning because you can go online to Manka's website, or you could go find her on the PBC and look up all of the donors to her campaign, and you can see that we're supported by small dollar donations from people like you. And to me, that makes a difference. I don't know that that's fair to categorize as a dirty trick. I just think it's something that I find wrong. The other thing that I would say on this is, the only thing they're saying about us is no new taxes. We haven't talked about taxes at all. We're talking about making sure that we fund our education, but nothing beyond what folks in the legislature are already talking about. And I think that's kind of a dirty trick. The current Republican proposal for funding schools is a property tax. Now, to break that down for a second, a property tax hits people like in the Puget Sound area disproportionately hard. If we change the way that levy funding is worked out so that people in communities where unfortunately houses just cost more, that's going to put more taxes on them to fund the rest of the state. And in places like Seattle, that doesn't seem right to me. In Tacoma, that doesn't seem right to me. In Redmond, Kirkland, Sammamish, Woodinville, Duval, it doesn't seem right to me. That doesn't seem like a fair way to fund our schools and take care of folks. So again, I don't know if it's a dirty trick, but it's something that they're doing, deliberately misleading people about what we're about, all to sort of like cover up what I think they're doing. And to me, that doesn't feel right. I don't think we're going out there and misleading anybody about any of the issues that Manka cares about. We're talking about why she's a proven leader and can be accountable on all the issues that we're talking about. We're telling people straight up what we think. So, I anticipate there'll probably be a lot of dirty tricks. What types they come from, I don't know. I don't think like that, and that's not how I want us to be. So it's hard to get in their head and imagine what kinds of crazy things they could do. But if you see any, please tell us. We would love to know. And I guess if you get any pro tips on that front, I'd be the first person to call. But I also think there's another answer to this, which forgive me for being like a little bit maybe crass or what have you, but I honestly don't care what they do. And I know that seems ridiculous. This is like we have an opponent, we need to beat them. But I legitimately kind of don't care what they do. And the reason for that is I've been to Indivisible meetings all throughout the Puget Sound now, in Kirkland and Kenmore, in Bothell, in Woodinville. I went to one in Bothell where it was like 10 people, and it was at a communal housing complex where they shared everything together, and they weren't a big Indivisible group. They weren't looking to be the biggest either. They were 10 people who really cared about this world and wanted to make a difference instead of a meeting. And I've been around to all those different meetings. I've been to Women's March huddles. I was there at the Women's March in Seattle myself. I watched as my parents for the first time got politically active after a long time of sort of sitting it out and go to those meetings. And so to me, I don't care what they do, really, because I see all of us and I think that's beautiful. And I wish that it had been there last year and we weren't in this position, but hey, here we are. And I don't want to spend any more time thinking about them than I already do. I can't open the New York Times or watch the PBS NewsHour, which is my favorite show ever. I can't even consume those things without feeling that rage of how did this happen? How are we pulling out of climate agreements? How is the firing of our FBI director to cover up and investigate? How is that normal, right? And so I don't care what they do. I want us to talk about the things we want to do, and I want that to be our campaign. And I want to go out there and share a vision with somebody that I think fits the kind of elected leader we should have in times like this. And that is somebody like Manka. And to me, that's what I want us to spend our time talking about. I hope that doesn't come across as too much of a pivot, because I really don't mean it like that. It's just, that's legitimately how I feel. Cool. Well, I will be here all through the rest. I'm hanging out with this one good tonight. If you would like to come help out with our canvas, please talk to either me or Robert, or you're down to help out and make sure we can draw some folks. Made the trek, know where to find us. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks for what you guys do. These meetings are incredible. So thank you.